I'm going to wind down on this one and say, pay attention to these 10 principles. I invite you into these higher guiding principles of sales that I have seen myself and others achieve the top sales results with a couple of different approaches and how they've done it, but they follow these 10 guidelines that are just evergreen. They will always work because they honor humanity. Hey friend, good to see you. How's your day kicking off? Nice. Mine's going good. I actually was doing a little research this morning in preparation for today's segment. I actually am kicking off a 5-day series around sales in general. I realize, just a little background on me, I spent 16 years working in financial sales, holding different positions. For about 9 or 10 of those years, I was a person doing sales, where I did B2C sales for a few years and then spent the bulk of my sales career in high-end B2B sales. And then after that, I transitioned into leadership, where I covered an entire business line where we focus on B2B sales, where my role was really understanding how to help unlock the potential of our team, help our sales teams be very successful in their sales strategies, and then the implementation of those strategies. And then finally, I started my business, and a lot of what I do in my business is I work with big corporations or mid-sized corporations to help them create more cohesion amongst their teams and help their salespeople achieve their greatest potential. And so as I've done that, I've both achieved excellence in sales myself, having achieved the top awards in any sales position I've ever held. I've always been ranked within the top 5%. And then also have had this really unique perspective of getting an internal lens of the behind the scenes kind of look at the folks who have been the most successful in sales across the United States. And as a result, I have found some of the things that work really well, and also the things that don't work really well. And if you're take a minute to look at the top of my YouTube page, you'll see the purpose of the Modern Monk. My business, right, is to unite people through their differences, to focus on things that matter. And you might be thinking, how does sales have anything to do with that? I'm glad you are thinking that. What I have found is that the old way of selling is actually actively contributing towards divisiveness. It creates disconnects between people, because in the past we've been taught that we should manipulate people, we should lie to them, we should deceive them, we should create false urgencies. You see, within organizations for a long time, we focused a lot on the result with salespeople, meaning we need this group of people to achieve X, Y, and Z, and we're going to incentivize them like crazy to make sure they can accomplish these goals. The tricky thing about that is, along the way, we forgot something true about humans, which is how we do things matter. If we're always using tactics that are meant to deceive people, that are focus on just ourselves and the goals that we're trying to achieve, if they encourage us at any level to lie, to manipulate, to apply false pressure, well, those are human behaviors that I'm going to categorize as a lower energetic level. They're a lower frequency in humanity, that when we choose to participate in those behaviors, we are making an agreement within ourselves, and we're assuming that the world is this place that is full of deception and manipulation and poor tactics. Today, I'm going to introduce you to the philosophy that I have found works across organizations, across individuals, and helps people achieve high-level sales by utilizing higher guiding moral principles. So I want to start out by just kind of laying the foundation of that, and then I'm going to introduce you to 10 concepts that I think you're going to really love, that come from one of my favorite sales book, which is The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino. You'll find it is evergreen, meaning this book has been on the shelves for decades and yet is still one of the top selling books, and it's because it guides us towards something more true about humanity that's important for you to know. But before that, I want to talk to you about how to sell is one of the most human things for us to do. In fact, there's literally a book written by a man named Daniel Pink that says to sell is human. Since you were a little kid, you have been trying to sell your parents to get you to do things, to get them to allow you to do things that maybe you weren't supposed to be doing, or maybe they were trying to create restrictions with you. Maybe you were trying to convince your siblings to do things. I think of one time when I was young, my older sister, she noticed that I was really good at making my bed and organizing my stuffed animals on my bed. And she would come in and tell me how good I was at doing this thing. And she would tell me about how bad she was. And she wanted me to just come in and show her how to do it. Of course, she was engaging in manipulation, but she was learning from an early age that if she found a way to compliment me, if she found a way to make me feel good, then she could get me to do something. As parents, we do this with kids. When you're trying to get them to eat the broccoli or eat the food, we want them to feel excited. We want them to be willing to try new things. These concepts that Daniel Pink brings out in this book is just guiding us towards this reality of inside all of us is a salesperson. And it's a really important strategy to understand how to utilize in a way that guides us towards higher guiding principle that creates a united front as a human species, that honors us as humans first, but then understands that we got to be helpful to other people to give them a sense of reality on how they can become their best and achieve whatever it is that the thing that you're trying to sell them helps them achieve. So I want you to think about this through one more lens, and that's through the lens of Zig Ziglar. Zig Ziglar was known as one of the greatest salesmen in the world. And you know what he said? He's famously quoted, "The best way to get what you want is to help other people get what they want." So today I'm laying the foundation, really embodying that quote, right? The best way to get what you want is to help other people get what they want. And now I'm going to share with you the 10 guiding principles that you'll find in the book, The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino, and really help illustrate what it means and why this is important for you today before you go and watch the next 4 videos that will be about individual approaches and how you can uniquely show up in the marketplace with a sales approach that's customized to you. So the first thing that Og talks about in this book is the power of good habits. Have you seen, I can't remember the name of the movie, but there's the new movie that recently came out with Will Smith being the father of Serena and Venus Williams, and it's a story about how they became like superstar tennis people, right? What I love about that story is it models exactly this. Will Smith in this movie, he has a vision, right? His character showcases that their dad had a vision of what he wanted them to become. So that's the leader, right? Had a vision of what he wanted them to become. And then he engaged the hearts of his kids early on, and Venus and Serena fell in love with the game of tennis. Why? It's because they were able to show up daily to practice this thing that mattered so much to them that they could eventually gain mastery in this skill set. Now here's the thing. It feels amazing as a human to gain mastery in something. Have you ever done something where you're like, man, I was really good at it, and then you got acknowledged for being very good at that thing? It feels incredible. The way that you become really good at things, though, is consistent, deliberate practice. So for sales folks, right, it starts by understanding, what is my goal? If you haven't mapped out what your end of year goal is, it's important for you to know what is your goal. Maybe that's like a financial revenue target. Maybe I need to produce $300,000 in revenue in order for me to hit my goal. Now the question becomes, what do you need to be doing on a daily and weekly basis in order to hit that goal? I know it's simple, but literally everything in life can be simplified to this. Whether you're trying to become a tennis star, whether you want to become physically fit, you first have to understand, or be amazing in sales, right? You first have to understand, what is my goal? And then what are the daily and weekly behaviors? What are the things I have to do in order to achieve that goal? And then step into the good, weekly and daily habits. And then from there, number 2, right? The importance of love is something that Og Mandino talks about in this book. And what I love about that is this. Love, it's a word that we've kind of become afraid of in some ways. What I mean by that is love is something that we don't talk about in the workplace a lot. Love is a word that we're careful on who we say it to and why. And yet, love is one of the most powerful motivators on the earth if you allow it to settle in a way that you understand the strength and power of love. Words that I associate with love are like courage, right? Courage. What is the animal that comes to your mind when you think of courage? The lion, right? I think of the lion. And then I think about the lion in what movie? The Wizard of Oz, right? The cowardly lion. And what is the cowardly lion in pursuit of? If I only had a heart, right? Courage and strength starts in heart, in your heart, right? If we can understand and embrace the concept of love and then figure out first, how do I love myself and have compassion? Compassion is a little bit different than empathy, right? We've heard a lot about empathy recently, and empathy is an important concept. But empathy allows us to show up where people are at in an emotional state, and we don't really do anything with that, right? We just feel what they're feeling. Compassion allows us to objectively look at something and see the truth of the emotional state and feel with it, but also be willing to rally with it to figure out what do we need instead. And that starts with ourselves. If we can learn to be compassionate with ourselves and be able to look at ourselves honestly, then in moments when we mess up, which by the way, you're gonna mess up, you're gonna be able to have compassion on yourself and say, great, this was a learning lesson. Now how can I be different the next time? And what's great about that is when you learn to do it with yourself, then you can show up with other people and you can allow people to be humans. You know, part of being human is making mistakes. Part of being human is people aren't always going to say the best thing to you. Sometimes they're going to get it wrong. Sometimes they're going to be caught up in an emotional reaction and they're going to offend you. Compassion and love allows you to show up and assume good intent from people first versus automatically assuming the victim state of mind that says people are out to get me. That's paranoia. Instead, we could shift our lens from paranoia to pronoia and look for the ways that people are trying to be supportive in the world, and also acknowledge part of humanity is people are flawed, and when they're not doing something that's like conducive to the space that we're trying to create, instead of getting angry at them, what does compassion look like, where you can show up where people are at, not from a place of judgment, but from a place of trying to understand, to see how you can help. Next up, persistence is key. That's number 3 that Og Mandino talks about in The Greatest Salesman in the World. Persistence is a really important topic, right? When you set out on a path and you've committed to a goal, you got to keep on showing up until you learn how to skillfully achieve that goal. Here's what I'm going to warn you about, though. One of those slimy sales tactics that people get caught up in is when someone has created a boundary with you and they've said, no, I don't want to hear from you anymore. We think of that as an objection that we're meant to overcome. And listen, depending on the emotional state of a human, we got to be able to intellectualize what does it mean for someone to create a boundary with me, and then what is a misunderstanding, right? The whole point of overcoming objections is when there is a misunderstanding and you can see a tremendous benefit for someone, that's an opportunity for you to realize, maybe they didn't quite understand what I was trying to say. Maybe I didn't communicate it very well. So now I am invited into an opportunity where maybe I can explain this in a way that makes a little bit more sense. But if someone has created a boundary and they say no, and I don't want to hear from you anymore, and you keep on persisting through that, my friend, you're not honoring someone's boundary in their life. And that's how we get in a lot of trouble in the world. You see all sorts of scandalous things that happen in the news based off of people not honoring the boundaries of other people, and it's a slippery slope that we get lost in. So persistence is important but it's important to honor the concept in a way that challenges you to become better in your approach. Sometimes when you get a hard no, maybe you didn't do something well in the initial building relationship stage. Maybe you said something that triggered that person, and you just got to know that there's a different approach that you maybe can have the next time. And then some people are just jerks, and that's okay. Some people that are just jerks, they shouldn't be the people that you're trying to win over anyways. Eventually, you'll find someone that you connect with. You'll find the right approach. The idea is that you keep on showing up until you get people to say yes, but you challenge yourself to grow your tactics in a way that are going to be more helpful. I think about this one business that I was trying to get in front of years ago, and I kept on showing up to that place, and the business owner wasn't there. But instead of getting frustrated with that and trying to manipulate people into getting me in front of the business owner, I just kept on showing up and building a relationship with the folks who were in the office. And then I learned that they like donuts, and I brought them a box of donuts. And after building a relationship, one day I was at my office and I got a call from the front desk staff saying, "Hey, the business owner's in. I'm gonna pretend like you just called. I'm gonna loop you in." So sometimes it's just showing up and building a relationship because no one said no. I kept on being invited in that space, and that can be the persistent effort. Maybe you keep on calling someone because it's really important for you to get in front of that business, and no one said that you can't call anymore. But maybe after you've called so many times, you realize that you're never going to get them on the phone. So there's a different tactic. Maybe you should stop by their business. Maybe you should find a different way of getting in front of them. The idea is that if you continue a persistent effort and it's not showing any results, you can know you probably shouldn't continue that behavior, because doing the same thing, expecting different results is the definition of what? Insanity. Don't be insane. Know that there's a different tactic, and then especially respect boundaries that people give you. There's a reason why they provided them. It's not your job to dishonor another human's boundaries. Next up, we want to make sure that we embrace the present moment. What does that mean? Embracing the presence means being with someone in the fullness of your energy. Have you heard of active listening? That's where this concept comes out the most for me, is that active listening is about being fully present with another human and listening to the whole story and making sure that you show up in the way that the moment needs you to show up. I was talking to someone who was a development director for a nonprofit. In other words, this is a high-end sales position in the nonprofit sector, who has many of the same sales tactics that they use as folks that are in B2C sales and B2B sales. And the people that get those jobs are highly paid because they're able to bring funds to the nonprofit, but people don't get anything in return. If you donate money to the nonprofit, maybe you get a tax write-off. But at the end of the day, it's more just appealing to your good nature and the mission that the nonprofit is serving. So as I was sitting with this development director, I asked them, what makes you successful in sales? And they said to me, Chad, one of the best things that I find that I do that help me the most is I show up where someone's at. And she gave me an example. She said, recently I was sitting down with a potential donor who had a legacy giving moment, meaning when they pass away, they are willing to will the organization X amount of dollars out of their wealth. And this person was known to be a multimillionaire. So when it comes to high-end prospects, this is a high-end prospect for someone who is a development director for a nonprofit. And she said, I came prepared for the meeting. I knew exactly what I wanted. But when I showed up, this person was talking about how someone close in their life had recently passed away. I realized in that moment, this person needed a friend. They needed someone to listen. They needed somebody to feel with them. If I would have transitioned to selling and trying to get what I want, then I would have scared this person away. They wouldn't have wanted to do business with me in the future. So I just needed to show up with them then. I let their moment happen for a couple of months. I sent them flowers. I showed them support. And then a couple months later, I came back and we revisited the conversation, and I ended up giving the legacy giving donation. And so the idea is that when you can be present with the person in the moment as it is, you can honor the natural cycles of life. You can think of your sales cycle like a farming analogy, right? Sometimes it's time to till the ground. Check out your territory. Weed out all the bad stuff that you know isn't what you're looking for, right? Sometimes you show up in a moment and it's time to plant a seed. This example with this nonprofit person, they were planting a seed. This person knew that they were there to talk about legacy giving. They had an emotional moment where a seed was planted, and then that seed was watered over time through just acts of kindness. And then when it came time to revisit the conversation, it was harvest season. It took a couple of months, but the payoff was large. And now this person who we got legacy giving from has a positive relationship with the salesperson. And what comes from a positive relationship? Referrals. So then you start building a natural sales cycle that is reciprocating because you're treating people well. The next thing that I want you to think about is improving yourself, right? This is number 5. What does improving yourself look like? They say, in the media, they're talking a lot about college right now and how college is such a great place for you to go, learn a lot, get exposed to a bunch of knowledge, get exposed to a bunch of different people, learn to work with other people, and know how to utilize resources, right? The challenge is if you stop learning right after college and you're not interested in reading and you're not interested in taking more courses, then it's hard to become someone that's truly valuable in the workplace, because today the workplace is changing so quickly with all the new technology that's coming out and the rate of change in the world. It requires people to continuously learn and be excited about learning and self-improvement. If you find that those are topics that you're not interested in, it's a worthy pursuit for you to get to the root of why are you not interested in learning anymore. Is it possible that you're not interested in what it is that you're pursuing? Let me give myself as an example. I was in financial sales for several years, but I knew from the beginning that I would not be in financial sales. Whenever people asked me what I was going to do next, I always had the philosophy, shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll land amongst the stars. I would always say, I'm going to be the next CEO of US Bank. I didn't know exactly what I would do next. I didn't know how I would get there, but I knew my big picture goal was to be a leader. I was raised in a dual business owner household. I was raised by leaders. It was in my DNA. I was also at the time a Pentecostal preacher who was being groomed to be a pastor. I was told I am a leader. Every space that I went into, I knew I needed to develop leadership qualities. So sales wasn't super exciting for me, but I knew if I was ever going to be a leader of an organization, it was really important for me to master this skill set, because it was going to help me be a greater leader someday. Because as a leader, what are you doing? You're selling your vision. And if you're going to be a CEO someday, you got to be able to sell that vision to a big marketplace. And so it's really important to learn this skill set. And so I was able to apply an intrinsic motivation for me to continue to learn the art of sales through the lens of someday I'm going to be a leader. The question is, what is that for you? What do you want to become someday? And how can you see how your job that you're doing today we're talking about sales, right, is somehow going to be helpful towards that future? And how can you start utilizing this skill set in the way that future self would need it, and then continue to educate yourself on how to apply it in that direction? Then you find yourself interested in learning, engaged in what you're doing, and you can maintain becoming a continuous learner. But it takes defining your future a little bit to make sure that you're continually willing to improve yourself, and then to look at yourself objectively, right? It's so important that we know in a moment where we have failed, we have not achieved success, right? Something didn't go right. Instead of pointing at other people and calling them the problem, I promise you, 99% of the time when I'm working with people, the problem is me, myself, and I. This is true for me. This is true for you. This is true for the majority of us. So the question becomes, can you become a mirror for yourself to be able to say, okay, what did not go well here? What was I trying to do? Where did I feel the friction in the moment? And can I address myself why that didn't work? If so, great, you can move on. If not, Who are people who are achieving excellence in this category that I can reach out to? Or is there a book that I can read or a YouTube that I can watch? Where can I make sure that I understand how to do this next time? But it takes humility. You got to humble yourself first, get rid of your ego, and then be willing to improve as you go. The next thing is mastering your emotions, right? We're on number 6 here. We want to be able to realize that they say emotional intelligence. I think that the data today has a 45% indication of success at work. So much of the breakdown that I see in teams when I look at a team like from a global perspective is emotional reactions, right? Humans are great when we can collaborate and connect and grow from one another through communicating. The challenge is that we have all these emotions that show up and we become triggered. And when we become emotionally triggered in a situation, we shut down and we're not able to think critically and grow. Especially as salespeople, oh my gosh, you're going to face a lot of rejection in the world. Because let's be honest, people are not that kind to salespeople when they feel like they're being sold to. And because we've had poor examples of these folks who lie and manipulate and participate in applying pressure and unnecessary moments that are untrue and deceptive practices, this is given a bad rap to salespeople. So one, we got to commit to being the difference that we want to see in the world, but then also we got to be able to know that unfortunately there's going to be moments where we're hit with people who are having a bad day or they just don't like salespeople and they're going to be mean, and you got to know ahead of time how you're going to respond to those situations and let it roll off your back. I had someone tell me one time, I don't respect people because they deserve my respect. I respect people because I am a respectable person. So being able to define yourself as a respectable person and what that means to you is so important so that you're able to show up in places and know I'm going to be a respectable person in this moment. I know emotions will try to jump into the driver's seat, but if you can let yourself just look at your emotions as neutral information and then figure out how to push them aside and not allow them to hold you back from your committed behaviors, your good habits. Remember, number 1, have good habits. If you have good habits and you're committed to them, you've got to learn to do them in spite of your emotional state, and you'll learn that emotions don't have to be in the driver's seat and you don't have to allow them to hold you back. And this is the secret that elite performers end up learning. Number 7, practice forgiveness. First for yourself and then for other people. We talked about this a little bit with the compassion conversation, right? But forgiveness is something that's so important because you're going to mess up. I think about a time when I was in B2C consumer sales, right? I was working as a loan officer and I had mastered my craft, I felt like, and I was doing so good, and I could quickly assess what a financial need was and then quickly help people see how they could save money, and in an hour's time I could have them in and out and like help them save a bunch of money and also make the bank a lot of revenue. Ultimately, also that would make it so I made commission. And I remember I had this sweet little old lady that came in, and I was quick and efficient with my process. So I was excited and I was like, yes, here's all the questions. Da 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 da. Here's what I see that you need. Boom. Here's how I can save you $25,000. Are you ready to do that today? And she was like, I gotta go. And I was like, whoa. What do you mean you gotta go? Like, we gotta do this. This is gonna save you $25,000. We need to do it right now. Like, can we just sign on the dotted line? And she was like, I gotta go. And I was so confused. I was probably like 21, 22 at the time. I was very confused why she didn't do it with me, because it was so clear how much money she was gonna save. Later that day, she came back and talked to the branch manager, and she told the branch manager that she wasn't sure that I was being honest. And because she didn't have a lot of financial acumen, she said it sounded good what he was saying, but the way that he said it felt so salesy that I felt like he was being deceptive. This is an important lesson. Going back to the previous example, right? Being present in moments. We got to be present with people and know that sometimes we can come across in a way that isn't helpful to the person in front of them, and they may not react to us well. For me, I had to then receive the feedback from my manager to know oof, I didn't do a great job with this person, because even though I was right in everything that I was saying, I didn't meet her where she was at and pace myself in accordance to what she was wanting. I made it about me and my goals, and as a result, she didn't have a great experience and didn't buy from me. And so I had to practice forgiveness for myself, because when you care a lot about what you're doing and you want to achieve excellence, you have to be able to find a sense of forgiveness for yourself, and find a sense of humility, right? You're gonna mess up sometimes, and that's okay. As long as you can forgive yourself, let it roll off your back, then move forward, and then know this: just like you have bad days, everybody else has bad days as well. Some people are just going to hang up on you sometimes. Some people are going to slam the door in your face. Some people are just mean and rotten people, and you got to forgive them. Because if you become bitter towards them, bitterness turns into resentment, and resentment becomes like a cancer inside of you, and it impacts the way that you show up in the world. You got to forgive people for not being great, because sometimes people are going through some things that you just can't understand, and you don't need to. You just got to know that that's true sometimes. You got to forgive them and move on, so that you don't fall into the dangerous place of being a resentful person, because it changes the way that you interact in the world. Number 8 is to take action, right? I was reading a book called Ikigai, and it talks about the longest living centurions in the world, people who have lived 100 and beyond, and where they have the biggest cluster of them. It's in Okinawa, Japan. They talk about how they deal with anxiety in Okinawa, Japan. It's through, instead of taking medication, they ask themselves a question: what do I need? That's a powerful question when you're feeling anxious, or when you're noticing you're not taking action. Your internal self knows. For me, often before I'm about to enter into a sales cycle, I know what I need first is to create a plan. Because if I can't see where I'm going, that stresses me out, and I'm not willing to take action. I have a manager that I was working with recently. He was raised differently than me. He was raised in a way that the first thing that he needs to do is to start marching down the road and knocking on doors and talking to people, and figure out what works and what doesn't work along the way, and then develop his plan as he goes. We have very different approaches, and the way that we take action initially is different. But the flip side of that for both of us is true. For him, taking action doesn't mean continuing to march forward, accepting no results. Taking action can mean, okay, now that he has some data points, maybe after 20 interactions with people, now he needs to apply a strategic lens to figure out what's working and what's not, so that he can perfect his process. That's a different form of action, right? For me, it's not getting lost in the planning process that I love, because it gives me energy. I gotta know there's a moment where it's time to move into action and execute my plan. Otherwise, I'm going to get anxiety. So the idea is, do what needs to be done in the moment. Be honest with yourself, right? And as long as you continue to be honest with yourself, take the action that needs to be done, you'll stay out of that anxious state of mind. And according to Ikigai, it's actually something that contributes to the longevity of life, because we're saying yes to the things that we need to get done instead of having an avoidant behavior. Number 9, again, we got 10 of these, 2 more to go. Number 9 is have a positive attitude. Now, here's what I'll say. A positive attitude is not false. I have a family member who I could roll out of a garbage can wearing a banana peel on my shoulder in sackcloth and ashes, and this family member would say, "Honey, you never look better." I know that's a lie, right? I know that that's not a genuine compliment to me, and that that's a false sense of positivity. That's just this person's natural disposition. A better approach to that, with a positive outlook in life, is actually found in the book How to Win How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. He says, in the first 30 seconds of meeting someone, you should find a way to compliment them. Tell them something that is true about themselves. What is something that you see as they're communicating? Maybe it's their communication style. Maybe it's their smile. Maybe it is something that they're wearing. But whatever is a genuine compliment, that is an observation that you have of them, you should find a way to do that, because People like to be seen, and people like to be appreciated for honest things. It's just part of our conditioning, but it's also making sure that that is honest, right? And that is a true thing that you're saying. And then positive attitude also goes back to pronoia versus paranoia. I've said this a few times, but I think it's important to define, because you get to choose your own mindset. Nobody gets to tell you how you're going to show up in the world. So do you want to show up in the world paranoid, thinking that everybody is out to get you and that everything is working and conspiring against you? I had a friend who was always saying, like, whenever something bad would happen, they would say, it's always something. That's a mindset. Be careful what you say to yourself, because your subconscious doesn't know the difference. Your subconscious hears what you're saying, and it becomes a belief system. And then before you know it, it's always something. The other side of that is pronoia. The universe is conspiring for the good of me. Everything is working out in the way that it is meant to. And if you can have that mindset, it's not woo-woo. It just makes you look for opportunities versus all the problems that are holding you back. That doesn't mean you don't look at yourself critically. It's important to bring a critical, not judgmental, right? You don't want to be a self-judgment, but to have a critical mindset that can honestly assess what is working and what is not makes you better. And then finally, you want to make sure that you're serving others. Going back to how I started today, right? Zig Ziglar said the best way to get what you want is to help other people get what they want. When you're in service of others, your journey as a salesperson is to be an active listener. Know your products. Know the way that you help people through these products. Know what people are looking for when they buy these products. What problem does this solve in their life? How does it enhance their life? How does it make things better? And make sure that you're prepared to identify those things in your initial conversation with them, to understand, why do they want this, right? And is the timing now? And if you see they do want it and the timing is now, then present it in a genuine way to what this person's needs are in service of them. But if you realize in the conversation that they do want this thing, but maybe the timing is now, it's not necessarily your job to force the timing through sleazy efforts, right? Instead, it's to understanding what is that person's timeline and what works best for them. If we can meet them where they're at, you'll find some people's timing is now because it works out perfectly for them. Some people's timing is in a couple months from now. Some people's is a couple weeks. Some people is years out. That's why it's helpful to have sales tools and using calendars or utilizing systems like Salesforce to be able to really track those future dates of things and use your calendar wisely so that you're constantly building your future pipeline in service of others when you honor people's timeline. And it also allows you to not have to create false urgency. You can know if somebody's timeline is further out in the future, well, now you need to find more things that are also ready to book and happen now. And so that just challenges you as a salesperson to have an approach that is like honoring humanity, that's not forcing them through deceptive processes, but gets you to have a broader net that you can cast so that you can catch, more fish, to use that analogy, versus putting all of your eggs in one basket. So always be in service to others. Okay, I'm going to wind down on this one and say, pay attention to these 10 principles. I invite you into these higher guiding principles of sales that I have seen myself and others achieve the top sales results with a couple of different approaches and how they've done it, but they follow these 10 guidelines that are just evergreen. They will always work because they honor humanity. And in the subsequent videos this week, I'm going to share with you a little bit shorter videos on individual approaches that I think you can find yourself in one of these 4 approaches that helps you also be able to have better communication with your manager or whoever is around you, to tell them, this is my unique sales style, so that you can show up fully as yourself all the time and achieve success in a way that's unique to you. Okay, remember this, advice is like eating fish. You gotta pick out the bones. Have a good rest of your day.